The airport buzzed with energy. Travelers zigzagging through terminals, wheels of suitcases humming across polished tiles, and the overhead intercom crackling with boarding announcements. It was just another day at one of the busiest international airports in the country. But for 17-year-old Layla Monroe, this wasn't just another day. This flight meant everything. Layla stood calmly near the glass wall of the first-class lounge, holding her boarding pass with care. Her presence didn't scream attention, but it commanded it, not through flashy clothes or loud behavior, but through the quiet confidence she carried. Dressed in a crisp blazer over a fitted turtleneck, with her long curls tucked behind one ear, Layla radiated poise. A soft smile played on her lips as she glanced down once more at her ticket. First class, seat 1A, she had earned this. Not through privilege, though she had that too, even if most didn't know it, but through discipline, grit, and brilliance. Just days ago, Layla had received a full-ride scholarship to Stanford University for aerospace engineering. This trip home was meant to be a moment of joy, of reunion, and of pride. Her father had planned a special dinner in her honor that evening. What Layla didn't know was that before she would ever reach that table, she'd have to defend her seat and her dignity at 35,000 feet. She scrolled through her phone, replying to her father's last message. "Boarding now, Dad. I'll text you when we're up in the air." Across town, Gregory Monroe, her father, and the CEO of Monarch Air, had cleared his afternoon calendar just to be there when she landed. Few people in the airline knew Layla was his daughter. Gregory believed in humility. He had taught Layla the same. Let your character speak before your name ever does. Around her, business travelers tapped at laptops, sipping espresso, and skimming through emails. Layla sat in a plush leather armchair, soaking in the ambient lighting and soft jazz. She glanced out at the runway, her mind drifting not to turbulence or time zones, but to memories of growing up alongside jet engines, terminal halls, and airport gates. She loved flight, loved the magic of movement. It's why she chose aerospace. It's why she felt so at home in this lounge. But across the room, someone else had noticed her, and not kindly. Clara Jennings, the lead flight attendant assigned to first class on this flight, stood at the lounge service station with a junior crew member. Her hair pulled tight in a professional bun, Clara projected control. But behind that facade, she carried something else. Judgment. Clara squinted in Layla's direction, then leaned toward her colleague. "First class is getting a little too open these days," she muttered with a chuckle. "I mean, really, how are we supposed to maintain standards when just anyone can walk in?" Her colleague offered a tight smile but said nothing. The tension in the silence said enough. Minutes later, boarding was announced. Layla stood, adjusting the strap of her bag, and made her way to the gate with her usual grace. She joined the short line of first-class passengers, most of whom were older, white, dressed in suits or designer wear. Clara now stood at the gate, scanning tickets with a practiced smile. "Welcome aboard," she beamed at a silver-haired man in a Rolex. "Enjoy your flight," she chirped at a woman with a Louis Vuitton tote. Then came Layla. Clara's smile froze. She took the ticket from Layla, barely glancing at it before handing it back with a brittle laugh. "Sweetheart, economy is down that way," she said, gesturing toward the back of the plane. Layla blinked, taken aback. "I'm in seat 1A, she replied politely, offering the ticket again. Clara didn't flinch. "There must be a mistake. Please head to economy so we can keep the line moving." People behind Layla began to shift, tapping their watches, sighing quietly. But Layla stood firm, her voice calm. "There's no mistake," she said. "I reserved this seat. I paid for this seat." Clara's tone sharpened. "I don't want to make a scene. Please step aside." Layla's hands tightened around the handle of her carry-on. Her breath came slowly, steady, controlled. She knew what this was. She had seen it before. Not always so direct, but always present. The assumption, the doubt, the silent accusation that you didn't belong. Still, she didn't raise her voice. She didn't step aside. "I'm boarding now," she said simply, stepping past Clara and onto the plane. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere shifted. First class was pristine. Cream-colored leather seats, ambient lighting, a curated playlist humming gently in the background. Layla placed her bag in the overhead bin, then slid into her seat, 1A, like she had every right to, because she did. But Clara wasn't done. She followed Layla into the cabin moments later, her heels clicking with authority. Her professional tone returned, but her eyes were sharp. "Excuse me, young lady," Clara said. "First class is reserved for paying passengers." Layla looked up, confused. "I am a first-class passenger." Clara crossed her arms. "I need to see that ticket again." Layla handed it over. Not trembling, not apologetic, just steady. Clara glanced at it, then scoffed. "Are you sure this isn't someone else's ticket? Where's your father now?" "He's meeting me at the destination," Layla answered calmly. Clara let out a breath, half laugh, half sigh. She didn't even try to hide the doubt in her voice. "Well, until we can confirm, I need you to wait in the galley." Layla sat still. "No," she said softly. "This is my seat." The whispers had already started. Across the aisle, a middle-aged man shook his head. "Trying their luck," he muttered. A woman in pearls clutched her purse a little tighter. Clara's lips tightened. "If you don't comply, I'll have to call security." Layla didn't move. This wasn't about a seat. It was about something deeper, something ugly, something she refused to bow to. Layla didn't flinch. She sat still in her seat, ticket in hand, her expression calm but unshakable. The weight of Clara's words, "I'll have to call security," echoed in the cabin, bouncing off the sleek overhead compartments in soft, ambient lighting like a slap in the face. Around her, passengers fidgeted. Some avoided eye contact. Others whispered behind palms. No one offered support. She was alone in a space she had every right to be in. Clara didn't hesitate. She turned on her heel and marched briskly down the aisle toward the galley, her voice low but urgent as she radioed the gate team. "I need security at first class. Now." Layla sat in silence, heart steady but fists clenched in her lap. She refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing her rattled. This was not the first time she had been mistaken for someone out of place. But this time, it wasn't going to end with her shrinking. 10 minutes passed, then came the shuffle of heavy footsteps. Two uniformed airport security officers boarded the plane. The mood shifted instantly, from discomfort to unease. As they made their way up the aisle, passengers fell silent, their eyes glued to the unfolding drama. Layla looked up at them, not with fear, but with composed defiance. One of the officers, a tall man with salt and pepper hair and tired eyes, approached her row. "Ma'am," he said, voice low and rehearsed, "we've been asked to escort you to a different seat." Layla met his eyes. "On what grounds?" "We're just here to assist, ma'am. Apparently there's confusion with your seating." "There's no confusion," she said, calmly holding out her boarding pass. "Seat 1A. That's me." The officer examined it, his brow furrowed just slightly. The other officer glanced at Clara, who stood a few feet away, arms crossed, watching the situation unfold with an air of vindication. "She's not listed on the manifest correctly," Clara said briskly. "That seat was marked for reassignment. It must have been changed." Layla interjected. "Changed by who? I checked in at the first class lounge an hour ago. No one said anything. No one changed my seat." The first officer looked back and forth between the ticket, the seat number, and Clara's stiff expression. "We don't want to escalate things further. Can you please come with us for now? We'll sort this out." Layla stood slowly, not because she was surrendering, but because she refused to let this moment define her. As she stepped into the aisle, bag in hand, a man muttered behind her, "Always got to make a scene." Another passenger snapped a photo with his phone. She could feel the sting of humiliation rising in her throat, but she pushed it down like she had so many times before. She walked the length of the aisle toward the back of the plane, her posture proud, her eyes forward, never meeting the gazes following her. They didn't see her pain. They didn't see her father's voice echoing in her memory. "Never bow to small minds. Your presence is not an accident, it's earned." Back in economy, Layla took a seat near the rear exit, tucked into a window row with barely enough room to stretch her legs. The difference between her original seat and this one was stark. In comfort, in space, and most painfully, in dignity. She pulled out her phone and stared at the unsent message to her father. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. "They moved me to economy. The flight attendant said my seat wasn't valid." Her thumb hesitated. She didn't want to make it a bigger deal than it already was. She didn't want to distract him before dinner. But this wasn't just about her anymore. She hit send. Seconds later, her phone vibrated with a reply. Stay put. I'm making the call. Don't let them rattle you. I've got this. Dad. Layla exhaled. She knew what that meant. Gregory Monroe didn't raise his voice often. But when he said he was making the call, it meant someone was about to learn the true meaning of accountability. Meanwhile, back in first class, Clara Harper moved through the cabin like nothing had happened. She passed out hot towels and offered top-shelf champagne with her signature tight smile. But there was a shift in the air, subtle but real. Not everyone had agreed with what had happened. An older woman in a gray cardigan, seated in 2D, whispered to her husband, "She looks so composed. I don't think that girl was in the wrong." "Probably a misunderstanding," he replied, but even he didn't sound convinced. And then, Clara's earpiece buzzed, a direct channel from the captain. She straightened slightly and pressed her mic. "Harper here." "Report to cockpit, now," the voice replied curtly. She blinked. That wasn't the usual tone. With a glance to her assistant, she stepped toward the front galley, heels tapping against the carpet, still confident, until she opened the cockpit door. Captain Rosner was waiting. He didn't stand. He didn't greet her. He just looked at her. "You just made the biggest mistake of your career," he said flatly. Clara frowned. "I don't understand." "You will, damn," the captain interrupted. "I just got off a secure call. That young woman you had escorted to economy, that was Layla Monroe." Clara's face drained of color. "As in Gregory Monroe's daughter, CEO of Monarch Air, the man who owns this plane." She stumbled back a step. I, I didn't know." "She never said." "She doesn't have to say," the captain said coldly, "because she earned her place. And your job was to respect that, not to judge her, not to rebuff her from the seat she paid for. Mr. Monroe is waiting on the tarmac when we land, and he wants a word, in person." Clara swallowed hard. I just thought." "You thought wrong, and the whole plane saw it." She turned to leave, but the captain added one final word: "Fix it, while you still can." Back in economy, Layla had settled into silence. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane reached cruising altitude. She stared out the window, trying to block out the low chatter and occasional glances. Then a flight attendant approached, not Clara, but a young woman named Brooke, soft-spoken, eyes filled with quiet sympathy. "Miss Monroe," she said gently, "we're so sorry about earlier. May I bring you something to drink? Water? Tea?" Layla nodded politely. "Water, thank you." Moments later, Clara herself appeared. She looked different now, pale, stiff, her confident gait noticeably shaken. She crouched slightly by Layla's row, dropping her voice to a whisper. "Miss Monroe, I just wanted to apologize. There was a miscommunication earlier. We didn't realize." Layla didn't move. "Didn't realize what?" she asked, tone calm, sharp as ice. Clara faltered. That you were my father's daughter?" Layla cut in. Clara nodded slowly. Layla looked away, back out the window. "You still would have removed me, even if I wasn't." Clara opened her mouth, then closed it. There was nothing left to say. Layla picked up her water and took a long sip. "Return to your cabin, Ms. Harper," she said simply. "My father will speak to you when we land." The descent began. Outside the cabin windows, the lights of the city twinkled like distant stars, growing brighter as the aircraft approached the runway. The pilot's calm voice echoed over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we've begun our final descent. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened. Cabin crew, prepare for landing." But inside the cabin, it wasn't just another landing. Something else was coming. Passengers whispered about the man waiting at the gate. The sharp-dressed older gentleman who had arrived on the tarmac with a black SUV and two high-ranking executives flanking him. They watched as airport security cordoned off an area outside the jet bridge, an unusual sight for any commercial flight. "Who is that guy?" one man muttered from 2C. "I heard he owns the airline," someone else whispered. First class was tense, economy was buzzing, and Clara Harper, seated stiffly in the jump seat near the galley, was visibly unraveling. She clutched the safety card in her lap, not out of necessity, but to steady her shaking hands. She replayed the captain's words over and over. "That's Layla Monroe, daughter of Gregory Monroe. Gregory Monroe, the man who built Monarch Air from a two-jet charter operation into a global carrier. A man known not just for his business acumen, but for his ruthlessness when it came to defending the values he built his company on: respect, fairness, and accountability. And now that man was here, for her. As the wheels touched down and the plane rolled to a smooth stop, Clara rose quickly to begin the disembarkation process, but her knees felt like water. She forced on her usual smile, greeting first-class passengers as they collected their belongings. But the eyes weren't just on her anymore. They were on Layla. Layla rose slowly from her seat in economy, gathering her coat and shoulder bag. Though the humiliation still burned, her posture was unbroken. She walked with calm grace to the front of the plane, passengers parting without a word. And then, the door opened. Gregory Monroe stood there, tall, composed, dressed in a tailored navy suit with not a single crease out of place. His eyes scanned the plane quickly, not with anger, but with a piercing clarity that made everyone hold their breath. He stepped on board with quiet power, the kind of presence that didn't need to speak to command attention. Layla reached him, and for the first time that day, she allowed herself to soften. He gently touched her shoulder. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low but warm. "I'm okay now," Layla replied, "but it wasn't right." He nodded once, no dramatic gestures, no outburst. Then he looked up. "Miss Harper," he said without raising his voice. Clara stepped forward from the galley, visibly trembling. "Mr. Monroe, I didn't realize." He held up a hand. "This isn't about who she is to me," Gregory said evenly. "It's about how you treated a young woman with a valid ticket who followed all procedures and was removed from her seat because of your assumptions. I, I thought she was in the wrong seat. The manifest wasn't matching." "Don't insult my intelligence," he replied, sharp now. "You thought she didn't belong. You didn't question the white man in row 1C or the executive in 1B, but a young black woman? Suddenly it's a problem." Passengers were now frozen in place. The curtain between economy and first class had long since lost meaning. The confrontation was playing out in full view. Clara's voice broke. "I didn't mean to." "But you did it," he said coldly. He turned to the two Monarch Air executives behind him. "Effective immediately, Ms. Harper is relieved of duty pending full investigation. Escort her off this aircraft." One of the executives nodded firmly. "Ms. Harper, please collect your things." Clara stood motionless, then numbly reached for her belongings. The crew around her said nothing, not a word of support, not even a glance of sympathy. The performance of superiority was over. As she walked down the aisle, the silence was deafening. Passengers didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The justice unfolding in front of them said enough. Layla watched composed. Her father stood tall beside her. And when Clara disappeared out of view, Gregory finally turned to his daughter again. "You handled that with more grace than most adults I know," he said quietly. "I learned from the best," Layla replied with a soft smile. Gregory exhaled. "Let's go home." That night, the story hit the internet. Someone from row 4 had recorded the moment Gregory confronted Clara. Within hours, it spread like wildfire. CEO of Monarch Air confronts flight attendant who humiliated his daughter. First-class racism exposed, teen removed from seat, turns out to be airline owner's daughter. The hashtags trended. Hashtag Layla Monroe. How she belonged there. Hashtag Monarch Justice. The next day, Gregory Monroe held a press conference. Standing at the Monarch Air headquarters, he didn't hide behind PR statements. He faced reporters directly. "Inclusion is not an option," he said, his voice firm. "It's a responsibility." He spoke of Layla, but not just as his daughter. He spoke of passengers who didn't get to speak up. The ones without a powerful parent or viral video. The ones who walked off planes, humiliated in silence. "This isn't about one incident," he continued. "This is about a culture that makes snap judgments based on skin tone, age, appearance. We are not going to be that airline." Reporters applauded, and behind the scenes, Gregory was already working. He ordered a full review of all frontline staff procedures, implicit bias training, and anonymous reporting channels for crew behavior. Not just lip service, real changes. Layla, meanwhile, returned to her life, but everything was different. She was no longer just a student with a scholarship. She had become a symbol, and she wasn't done. It had only been 2 days, but Layla Monroe's life had shifted in ways she couldn't fully comprehend yet. The video from the flight, the moment Gregory Monroe calmly confronted Clara Harper, had now surpassed 10 million views. It had been reposted by celebrities, civil rights activists, and major media outlets. Layla's name was suddenly on every screen, her face the quiet symbol of resilience, her poise a contrast to the loud injustice she had endured. But she hadn't asked for any of this. She hadn't stood her ground to go viral. She did it because she refused to let anyone shrink her. Still, the attention was relentless. Her inbox overflowed. Interviews, invitations, praise, and outrage from people around the world. Some wanted her to speak. Others simply wanted to say thank you. I saw my daughter in you. You reminded me I don't have to be silent anymore. First class or not, you earned your space. Layla was grateful, but also overwhelmed. She sat on the balcony of her family's home that evening, wrapped in a light cardigan, staring out over the San Francisco skyline. The warm breeze carried the smell of gardenias from below. Her phone buzzed again, another interview request. She sighed and set it face down. Behind her, the patio door opened. Gregory stepped out, 2 mugs of tea in hand. Chamomile, he said, handing her one. She smiled. Thanks, Dad. He sat beside her. The quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was understanding. Gregory had been in the media spotlight more times than he could count. But this was different. This was personal. How are you holding up? He asked gently. Layla stared ahead. I didn't think it would get this big. I just wanted to get home, that's all. He nodded. And now the whole world sees what I've always known. You're not just smart, you're steady. You make people rethink themselves without even raising your voice. She looked at him. I didn't even want to say anything at first. I just didn't want to be seen as difficult or angry. That's how they keep you quiet, he said. They rely on your restraint so they can get away with their disrespect. She sat with that for a while. Then she asked, was I wrong to let her go that easy? Gregory's brow furrowed. You didn't let anyone off easy. You stood tall. You gave her a moment to reflect. That's more than most people would have done. Layla nodded. Do you think she'll learn anything from it? I think she already has. That same night across town, Clara Harper sat alone at her kitchen table, staring at the glowing screen of her laptop. She hadn't opened her email in 2 days. The media firestorm, the public backlash, the shame, it was too much. But tonight, she knew she had to face it. Her inbox was full. Dozens of internal messages from Monarch Air's HR department, staff updates, even a notification that her badge access had been temporarily revoked. Her employment wasn't terminated yet, but it was clear. She was hanging by a thread. Clara wasn't used to being the villain. For years, she prided herself on being efficient, composed, the kind of lead attendant captains requested. But now the illusion had shattered. The headlines weren't just about Layla anymore. They were about her. Flight attendant humiliates teen, learns she's the CEO's daughter. She read every comment, every condemnation, and slowly, uncomfortably, something cracked inside her. She had removed Layla not because of a system error, not because of a mistake in the manifest. She had looked at a black girl in first class and assumed she didn't belong. That realization twisted her gut. She opened a blank email and began to type. To Gregory Monroe. Subject, my sincere apology. Mr. Monroe, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from right now, but I have to try. I made assumptions. I failed, not just as an employee of your airline, but as a person. I treated your daughter in a way I can't take back, and for that, I am truly sorry. Not because of her last name, but because she didn't deserve it. No one does. This experience has forced me to confront things I've ignored for far too long. Bias I never admitted to. Power I used without thinking. I want to change. I need to. If there's any way I can help repair the harm I've caused, I'm willing. Clara Harper. She hovered over the send button for a long time, then clicked. 2 mornings later, Layla joined her father in the conference room at Monarch Air's headquarters. The company had announced the launch of a new initiative, Clear Sky, a comprehensive training and reform program centered around cultural sensitivity, dignity, and passenger equity. Gregory had asked Layla to co-author the design alongside a diverse team of employees and external consultants. "Are you sure you want me this involved?" she asked him. "I don't want a spokesperson," Gregory replied. "I want a stakeholder, someone who knows what it feels like to be treated like they don't belong. That's a perspective no amount of training modules can teach." Layla agreed, and she poured herself into the project. Late nights, whiteboard sessions, pilot programs. She reviewed every policy, not just for flight attendants, but gate agents, pilots, customer service. She insisted on accountability frameworks, anonymous reporting systems, required renewals for certification. "I don't want a pretty initiative," she told the board. "I want a permanent one." And the board listened. The press dubbed Layla the future face of airline equity, but she didn't care about the titles. She cared about the girl after her, the next Layla who wouldn't have a CEO father to step in. That was who she was building for. Weeks passed, and then a package arrived at the Monroe residence. It was small, neatly wrapped, no return address. Inside, Layla found a simple letter and a small, tarnished pin, a Monarch Air flight attendant badge returned. The letter read, "Bohem, Layla, you didn't know me, Grace, but you gave it anyway. I stepped on that plane thinking I had power, but you walked off showing me what real strength looks like. I don't know if I deserve a second chance, but I wanted you to know I'm trying. You changed me." Clara Layla sat with the letter in her hands for a long time. She didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just felt still. Sometimes justice didn't roar. Sometimes it echoed, quietly but deeply. She placed the letter in her desk drawer, not out of anger, but because she knew there was still more work to do. 6 months later, the world had not forgotten the girl from Seat 1A. Layla Monroe had since returned to her studies at Stanford, but she was no longer just a student. She was a guest speaker at international forums, a consultant on inclusion policy, and a name mentioned alongside changemakers twice her age. But to Layla, all the labels, icon, activist, inspiration, were secondary. What mattered was that change had happened. Monarch Air had implemented the full Clear Sky initiative, now considered a benchmark in the airline industry. Major carriers around the world reached out to replicate the model, and for once, it wasn't performative. The training was immersive, real stories were included, real voices were heard, and real accountability followed. Gregory Monroe had stepped back from public speaking. "This is her moment now," he said in an interview. "I built the runway. She's the one flying." Layla didn't do press tours. She did classrooms, town halls, one-on-one mentorship with young girls who had never seen someone like them lead the room. She wasn't building fame. She was building legacy. One crisp fall morning, Layla boarded a flight to New York for the Global Voices of Leadership Summit. She was the youngest keynote speaker in the summit's history. As she approached the gate, a few passengers whispered. "That's her," someone said. "She's the girl from the video." But this time, Layla didn't shrink. She didn't look down. She met their glances with a smile. Calm, strong. She took her seat in first class, 1A again, with quiet resolve. As the plane ascended, she glanced out the window, watching the clouds drift past, golden light pouring through. Her phone buzzed. "From Dad, proud of you today and every day before it." She smiled and replied, "Thank you for letting me fight my own battles. You never needed permission. Just a reminder that you were never alone." She set her phone down and closed her eyes. Later that evening, the summit hall was packed. Global CEOs, diplomats, educators, students. The lights dimmed. Her name was announced, and Layla took the stage. She wore no cape, no dramatic entrance, just a charcoal blazer, slacks, and her signature poise. The crowd silenced. She stood at the podium. "I was removed from a seat I paid for," she began, "but that seat was never the real issue. The real issue was belief, or rather disbelief, that someone like me could belong in a space like that." She paused. "But here's the truth. I don't just belong. I build. I lead. I create space for others to sit beside me." She looked out at the sea of faces. "We're done asking for permission to exist. We're done proving our worth. We're not here to be tolerated. We're here to be trusted, to be respected, and to lead." The room erupted, not out of politeness, but because she had said what many had never found the words for. When she stepped down, people stood, not just in applause, but in solidarity. After the summit, as Layla rode back through the glowing streets of Manhattan, her mind drifted not to the stage, but to the girl she once was, quiet, careful, taught to shrink in the face of scrutiny. That girl was still in her, but now she shared space with someone stronger, someone who refused to let small minds dictate her worth. And she wasn't done yet. Weeks later, Clara Harper walked into a community training session in Seattle, not as a flight attendant, but as a guest speaker. Her story had changed, not rewritten, but reclaimed. She didn't pretend it hadn't happened. She owned it. She talked about the moment her professionalism became prejudice, about how power unchecked can become poison, and about the young woman who showed her what humility actually looked like. After her talk, a young black girl approached her shyly. "Was it hard," she asked, "to admit you were wrong?" Clara knelt to her level. "Harder than you know," she said, "but it was the best thing I've ever done." The girl nodded slowly. "I hope I get to meet Layla one day." Clara smiled. "I hope you grow up knowing you never need someone to let you belong." Layla never asked for an apology from Clara. She never needed one, because she hadn't waited for the world to change. She had become the change. 1 year later, Layla Monroe returned to the skies, this time on a Monarch Air mentorship tour for young girls in STEM. On that flight, a teenage girl named Amina sat beside her. "Are you really Layla Monroe?" she whispered. Layla turned to her, smiling. "I am, but you're the one that matters right now." "Why me?" "Because you're going to sit in this seat one day, not just on the plane, but at the table where decisions are made. And when that day comes, I want you to remember one thing." She paused. "Your presence is not a favor. It's a fact. Don't let anyone make you earn what you've already proved." Amina nodded. She didn't know what her future held. But in that moment, with Layla beside her and the sky stretching endlessly beyond the windows, she believed she could soar. And that was the legacy.